Well, I don't live there, so no, I can't.
But you will live there in winter.
He sounds like baby gold.
Huh?
He sounds like baby gold.
Yeah. Yeah. You will say baby girl for all his life.
Yeah.
Reliable.
Okay, I just did it again. Yeah, welcome to my presentation about gulls. Today is Caspian Gull Day, so we need to celebrate it. And yeah, the title is my favorite bird, seagull, because many people don't really know the gulls, they just call them seagull. But we know better, and you also will belong to the people that just know seagulls. We know different species. And so we're going to talk about modern aging, and also there's also about identification of the rather common species here to start with. We have a small introduction to the taxonomy of genus, and we'll also end with a quiz so you can train a bit.
Nice.
Yes. So it's an overview of the large gulls we have in the old world, and there's also the American ones, so Jànos, the American herring gull. But yes, we have the yellow one, that's the yellow-leg gull, Michaelis. I always only have the Latin names, where the scientific message you will learn them today. So Michaelis is the yellow-leg gull, and that's here in this large yellow area. And here we have the subspecies Michaelis, which is the nominal form, actually, but I think I even changed that. Then we have Atlantis, which is only really on the small islands here, but also thought to maybe be here on the west coast, but it's not really the same, so they're not really sure what these birds are. Maybe they're also integrates. And then there's also another subspecies, Jànos, which breeds up here at the Portuguese coast, but they just differ by measurements and by call. They're not that different, but that's the yellow-leg gull. And then the green thing we have Argentatus, which is the herring gull. It's the most common gull we have here. It has a very widespread bird species, and in the eastern part of its distribution range there's the subspecies Argentatus, the nominal form, and in the west we have Argentois. They're a bit lighter on the back and more a bit different, but that's also it. And then also the red thing, we have the lesser black-backed gulls, and there's splits. We have up here, for example, the small red part here, and also I think a bit on this coast here, we have the nominal form Fuscus, which is the really dark one we call Baltic gull, which everyone wants to see. And then in the very west of the range we have Caesi, and in between there's Intermedius, which is not really clear if it's like just an integrate between the other two, because it's also very a gradient in black coloration. So Caesi is very light colored and Fuscus is almost jet black. Yes. And then we have one of the most important gulls, which is Caspian gull. I'll be a bit quicker now. Then we have also the Armenian gull, Armenicus, which is related to the yellow-leg gull. We have the Heugels gull, which breeds up here. Then there's another form of lesser black-backed gull, which also rather light mantled, looks a bit more like a Caspian gull. That's the steppe gull, barbarensis, and then we have the Mongolian gull, which you will see in Mongolia. It's really like only here in winter, it also goes to the coast, so that you can see it also somewhere else.
Also run by gull.
Yes, Mongolicus. And then we have this weird thing here, it's Tamarensis, but it's not really known what it is. It's probably just a subspecies of lesser black-backed gull, but in the eastern range they look very similar to the Viga gull, so maybe it's also integrate if it's a hybrid form, but it's not really figured out. Yes, and in general, first before everything started we had Caspian gull, and we had the pre-form of the Argentatus, of the herring gull, and that's first of all the herring gull. From this pre-herring gull we got the greater black-backed gull, so it's like yeah. And also the normal herring gull, and we also got the Atlantis yellow-leg gull. So at the beginning there was only yellow-leg gulls here. That was when like Europe was covered by glaciers, mostly. And then the Atlantis yellow-leg gulls, they had like an influx into Europe, and that's how we got Armenicus, the small here. And then they went all the way back. There was no yellow-leg gulls here, and in another influx they came again into the Mediterranean, and then we had the normal yellow-leg gull we have today. So this is sort of the oldest form of yellow-lipped gulls. That's the one you call the Zorus gull with the very dark head and dark neck.
Okay.
Yes. And on the other side, Caspian gull did something way cooler because it went north and produced the lesser black-backed gulls. And it started with the Horned gull, and also from the Horned gull you also got the steppe gull. So the steppe gull is actually closer related to the Horned gull than to the Caspian gull. And they also produced the other lesser black-backed gulls, like the Caspian gull, with Fuscus, Grelsi, and Intermedius, which is quite fun because they look rather different to Caspian gull, right? And also the others are also related to the Caspian gull. So all these nice rare species are actually only like a shadow of Caspian gull.
Oh,
yes.
of course.
Do you know which species and subspecies that has been recorded in Denmark of these ones?
Oh, I don't know. I can tell you what I think would be first for Denmark. Is there a record of a meaning gull, right?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. I think that's not in all Northern European countries.
Yeah, one record of that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, there you just I'm not talking about identification of these. Maybe in another point we can have to talk about rare gulls. But for now, the basics are most important, and you can just read the books about the rare gulls. And if you know the basics, then
If you know the basics, you will see the
start.
difference.
Yes.
And Grelsi, like the lesser black-backed gull Grelsis that also are in the UK, they are very common on Iceland.
Yeah. I think also we had some Grelsi here like 2 weeks ago, because there was only one day where there's like 5 or 6 really light-mantled ones, and then after I didn't see them again. So maybe there was a bit of why they didn't have rings, so oh well. Yes. Some more introduction again. The herring gull, there's 2 subspecies like I said. We have the Argentois, which breeds in Western Europe here, like in the UK. The purple areas are like breeding areas where they stay all year round. Blue is wintering area, and the orange would be a breeding area that they leave in winter to winter somewhere else. In all the maps, it's from the Merlin app, the maps. And yeah, so this is Argentois we have here breeding in Western Europe. And then what we usually see is Agitatus, and they breed all around Scandinavia. And you can see that the birds breeding at the coast, they usually stay at the coast, but the birds inland, where it's really cold in winter, they need to leave that area, so they winter also mostly on the Baltic Sea. And there's some colonies of single pairs, like I said, mostly on the coast, but also some inland that need to leave in winter, and it's the most common bird we see here in Skagen, so that's the basic species you need to get to know. Then we have the Caspian gull, and also breeds in colonies, also together with other gull species. And also in recent years there was a lot of hybridization with other species, especially with the herring gull, and they also had a large westward expansion, and it's also getting increasingly common in Skagen. So last year we had the record in autumn with I think 11 or 13 birds, but we're already at 9 this spring again, and so getting more and more regular here. I had one yesterday. And you can see all the breeding areas here, it's very shattered, and also there's only really these small dots here, but it's not really accurate, so and by now they're breeding largely also in Poland almost everywhere, and I would say also like in Estonia and stuff, and definitely also in Eastern Germany. But then often inland and then also mixed colonies, so that's sort of a hybrid zone. And then they winter quite far south. Yes. Yeah, that's the most fun species almost, because there's so many subspecies in there. The most interesting in migration behavior and also molt. So we can start from the west with Perelsi. So they breed here like Spain and the UK, France also has Perelsi. And they have the lightest mantle color from the Western European subspecies. And then they winter like here, or she sometimes even stay like in the breeding area, and sometimes even down to here. And then it gets a bit darker in the mantle color, and the birds we get here, that's intermedius. So they are intermediate dark, sort of. There's also a bit of variation in there. And they usually winter somewhere else. So they are mostly the birds that come down here to Morocco. I think only few of the Grelsi really reach that far south. It's more like the intermediates that are long distance migrants compared to Grailsea. And so that also means that, yeah, usually we get the first Leatherback gulls, like most other arriving spring passerines. Some point, I think April, that's when the Leatherback gulls arrive here, while in Western Europe you have them year round. Yes, and they are also breeding all in Baltic Sea, like most all in Norway, Sweden, and I think only really very east it becomes fuscus then, and also especially up here in Finland, that's where fuscus breeds, and that's the darkest subspecies we get there. It's like really dark, and they have a very interesting migration because it's completely different. They migrate inland and over these lakes here, and winter then in Western Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. So they are very long distance migrants, and they're also more different, but more to that later. And then we also have the eastern subspecies, which is Heudenskald. They already breed here until here, I think about. They're also again very light colored, and Babalendis is like this breeding colony here, or this breeding area here. And then there's also Timorlens, which is not really clear what it is, but probably also some species. And they're even further east. But for us, the important ones are really only intermediates is the one we get regularly, Grailsea probably, but you cannot really prove it if they don't have a ring, and Fuscus, yeah, so
If you have one Grailsea in like winter,
yeah,
very late autumn,
yeah,
we have some photos, then it's apparently
Yeah.
okay. But of course they're just on the other side of the pond.
Yes.
So
Yeah, they should not be rare, but it's just not, because there's so much, it's also like a gradient, so if you have like a western intermediate, they can also be quite light coloring then, so they need to be proven. But for example, 2 weeks ago there was one day where there was like 6 also light colored Grailsea type birds, and I didn't see them before, I didn't see them afterwards. So probably there was just a few birds with the word west winds that came in, but you cannot really prove it because they don't have ring. So,
But
that
I think
was-
sometimes if you like, I don't know how they will look at it of this, and if you have a lot of intermediates, and then like if you have like Grailsea between intermediates, you
Yeah.
have some pictures of it maybe in flight.
Yeah, but that's also like winter coloration is so much variation.
But in winter, it's also because intermediates is not here in the winter.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Grailsea tends to stay a little further north, so if you have them in winter, the light back one in winter, then it will be okay for dog bed.
At least for love.
But Fuscus, so the Baltic gull,
Yeah, that's the Baltic gull. So that's the
it
one.
also breeds in northern Norway.
Yeah, so like in the very but like in the very east
Yeah.
of the like Baltic Sea, not anymore even. I think there's also some here in the very eastern Baltic Sea, but mostly like in the north.
But actually also those that you see in northern Norway, a little bit to the west,
Yeah.
there are colonies of Baltic gulls also. And
Yeah.
they it's like we have a coloring record of a Baltic gull ringed as a chick in Finland.
Yeah.
And then one from the Norwegian colonies, and you could also maybe expect that those from the Norwegian colonies probably would tend to go more here, because they're on the west side of the Scandinavian peninsula.
And then it's a bit also gradient. There's also the phrase fuscoides, which just means it looks like a fuscus, but I don't know, maybe not. And that's the very eastern intermediate birds. So they can be as dark, they just look the same. They mold almost the same. So that's why we cannot identify the fuscus, even though they are very different in mold to the classic other Grailsea intermediates. But like I said, the eastern intermediates, they can approach that very, very much. So it's a bit difficult to define this, and also to identify it is impossible if you don't have a ring, or it's autumn, then they're so different that I think you can be rather confident. Yellow-leg gull, I already told you, we have the Michaelis, and that's also a subspecies that goes into Central Europe and breeds in the inland colonies. That's Michaelis, and it's also the one we would get in Skagen. And then we have like this at the coast here, this Lusitanius. Atlantis, that's the oldest form of the yellow-leg gull. It's also looks quite cool, right? Alan already saw one. That's fucking Sweden.
Yes.
First for Sweden, because they're quite dark, and of course they don't really migrate and stuff. They disperse a bit maybe, but so it's quite cool to get that in Sweden, I think. and then
There's an
We have-
accepted record of that.
Yes.
yeah, in Almensdorf,
Yeah,
like,
in my hometown.
No?
It's
yeah, that's quite cool. And then we have this question mark here because no one knows what's going on there. They look a bit more like Atlantis, but also like quite. So it's a bit unsure if they're like the same subspecies or if it's a bit of a mix, like an integrate form sort of these other subspecies. But they're also a bit darker, a bit more black in the wing, but yeah. So the real Asaurus skull comes from the Asaurus. Yes. And yeah, molten aging. Most birds need 5 years to reach adult plumage, so there's a lot of aging going on in between. We can tell a lot of age classes, but it also gets a bit uncertain at the end because it also depends a lot on hormones and stress and food supplies. And some birds are slower in the end to reach adult plumage. And some birds, like 7 years old, still look a bit immature, especially on the bill and legs sometimes. And some are rather fast. And they have several complete molts in between. But one theory why they have so many immature plumages is that they want to signal immaturity to avoid competition, because of course if gulls are quite competitive, and especially on the breeding grounds, and otherwise maybe adult gulls would see you as a problem and maybe fight you a bit more. But if you're just immature, if you look like a baby then, or like a teenager, then maybe they have yes, there's the complete molt every year I just talked about. They have it in summer, so they start in May and it goes until August usually, end of August. And yeah, also quite interesting is the juvenile molts, because that can be quite nice for identification. They have a partial post-juvenile molt in autumn after they leave the breeding grounds, and this depends a lot on the species and also where the bird is coming from. We'll talk about it in more detail later, but it usually only includes mantle and scapulas, and in some species also some other wing coverts, but no flight feathers or anything. Yes, we age them in cycles, not in calendar years, because the bird looks the same at the 30th of December, then it looks at the 1st of January, but so it's a bit more precise to say in which molt cycle it is. So a bird is in its first molt cycle and in its first complete molt in its first summer. And one molt cycle always goes from one complete molt to the next complete molt, and usually you would, if you want to have it precise, then you would use, like when it drops P1, that's sort of when it goes into the next molt cycle, because that's the first feather to be molted. P1. Yeah, like I said, it's very variable in plumage pattern, but also molt progression, and it's influenced by hormone stress and food supply, so especially older age classes, it's a bit difficult to be sure. So everyone needs to know what we're talking about. We have the mantle up here, then the scapulas, and usually that's the two feather groups that are molted in most species in their first winter or autumn. And then we have the lesser coverts, as these with the median coverts, and then very important for the identification of the immature gulls is the greater coverts. So we need to study the greater coverts.
Yes, of course.
This is a typical Laos agentatus. What's Laos agentatus?
Herring
Herring gull, yes, agentatus is herring gull. And we'll talk a lot about this, but here you can see that it's like it forms these rows here in the greater coverts, and they're all white and dark rows throughout the greater coverts. I'll talk a lot about that later, but it's good for agentatus.
I have 6 tertials.
Yes, they have a lot of tertials, and I think there are 17 to 22 secondaries.
Interesting.
It's a bit weird. And then usually you don't see the secondaries because they cover the greater because there's probably just like little swing. Then with primaries, when they're fresh, they can have these white spots when they're just molted. White spots or not can later be important for aging, and then these white spots, just because feathers fresh, they can be a bit misleading. So you need to differentiate between proper white spots or just white tips to primaries because they're fresh, and then you can also see the tail. Yes. This is the example of the herring gull, so we just go through it how it gets rid of its immature plumage. So we start in complete juvenile plumage in August. Then the birds we get here, they molt their mantle and scapulas. You can see that there's a bit of grey on the back.
Yes.
You can see that. also over the winter, that's now in February, there's always the time there. Also the head gets a bit lighter because there's a bit of abrasion, so they get a white head, which can also cause a bit confusion with Caspian gull because people look for white heads, but especially now also many of the herring also can get a very light head.
What did you say they got lighter? Was it?
Abrasion?
Abrasion.
Where?
Abrasion.
Okay.
Where, yeah. And bleaching, especially.
Yes.
You can get really white gulls, like, that almost look like locust gulls, because they're so bleached now in May, for example.
Okay.
So you still need to be careful with the identification of the white gulls, of course. This is another example, and this one didn't mold anything. It's still in complete juvenile plumage. You can see the mantle feathers are still dark. And that would be a bird that, for example, breeds in Norway. We'll talk about this in more detail, but they don't do any mold until the first complete mold because they don't need to. They stay further north, so the sun is less strong there, so they bleach less and so on. Yes, and then they start their first complete mold. That's 4th of June, and this one is already molted. Most of its primaries. Probably I would say that bird is from Western Europe, because our birds are not that far in primary molt. So then they start there a bit early. But you can see molted, these are still juvenile. It has also molted many greater coverts here, and all the other coverts they're like this greyish smudge. They don't have this nice regular pattern like the juvenile wing anymore. It starts molting its tail, that they usually start after molting P7, which it did. So it's allowed to molt its tail now. And also back and everything gets like once renewed, and then they look like this.
Oh.
So we have the greater coats. If you look at the greater coats, they have this like very fine pattern, not this regular barring anymore. The tertials, they get like a darker center with these irregular white spots at the edges, and then you have, of course, like starting to get like grey feathers. But this can vary a lot. Sometimes they don't have grey feathers. Sometimes they just look like this. This is also the same age. But if you look at the greater coats, they still have this fine pattern, so they don't not juvenile plumage anymore.
That's the second cycle.
That's after the first complete molt, so now they're in the second cycle.
Yes. Okay.
So you can see here that the June doing its molt, then in November they look like this.
Yeah.
Also in August they molt a few more coverts or mantle feathers usually, so it's a bit grayer. You can also see that the tail looks a bit different. It's like broad black band with very, very fine markings going into a very wide tail. It's also quite different to a juvenile tail. You can see here the markings are larger.
Yeah, but the guy on the bottom, that's 6.
And the guy on the bottom,
he's,
that shows the variation. And actually many of the birds we get here that are in the second cycle, they look like this. But they
so
just
the best to look at
the,
is the greater cover there.
yeah, and also all the pictures not in a very high resolution, but you can also, the pattern here is also different. It has like this anchor pattern, and it's not as solidly dark, like they have very large and dark markings here.
Yeah.
Yes. And that would already be in February, so there, if you say calendar years, then this would already be in its 3rd calendar year. But we do it in cycles, so whenever you see white means cycle in that calendar year.
Yeah.
Then after the next molds, they mold more feathers, of course, and then also the primaries start to get grey. And this is also the first time they get some white dots on the feathers. Yes, so they just get a bit grayer, the complete mold again, and 3rd cycle, so they're in their 4th calendar year, and then they turn adults after the next mold. And you can still see that there's some dark markings here in primary coverts, and also many birds still keep some dark markings, especially on the primary coverts. That's where you would look on flying birds for maturity, because that's the last places where they have like still dark markings, but they can also often show it on the bill, or maybe some herring gulls still have a dark eye, which doesn't mean that they're Caspian gull, it just means that they're immature. Yes. So there's for the first mold of the juvenile birds, so they hatch and then they have been sort of the mold in between when they hatch and the first complete mold. Can be quite important for identification, and it can also vary a lot between the species. and we look at sort of 5 different types, and they're sorted by the mold extent. So like type 1 molds very little until the first complete mold, and type 5 molds almost everything until the first complete mold. And yeah, that's how it works. We look at them a bit closer. So type 1, that's sort of the herring gulls that breed in Scandinavia, especially like Norway and the Eastern Baltic Sea. There's then also the greater black-backed gull, which is Marinus. So if you see that name again, that means greater black-backed gull, the house Marinus. But also the white gulls, like the Glaucus gull, the Iceland gull, they also belong to this mold type, and they mold nothing. They just stay in complete juvenile plumage until their first molt in spring. And also when you see them, then they're also, the feathers are in a very nice condition, also like in February, for example. So feathers are the oldest because they're not molted, but they're in a very nice condition because they are wintering still, also just stay quite far north, so the sun is not that strong, and the feathers stay in a better condition, so then they also don't need to molt. Yeah. And the picture we have here, what species is it? Yeah, that's a herring gull. And you can see also the mantle is still these large dark centers, so a complete juvenile plumage also, of course, everything is really dark on the bill is still dark. Then we have the most common here, so most apparent as you can see here in winter they have molded their mantle and scapulas like this one, that's also a herring gull. And this is the Argentatus we get here, so the breeding birds, let's say of southern Sweden, but also like of Central Europe, and then all of the western herring gulls, the Argentus subspecies. It's also the mold cycle of the western lesser black-backed gulls, Graelsi, and also about of the greater black-backed gulls that breeds in rather southern part of the distribution range, so back in Denmark, for example, or in Germany. They also belong to this mold type, and that just means that they mold their mantle and scapulas, but they don't mold the rest, so they only mold these parts here. You can see that they get this anchor pattern, so they have at the tip of the feather, which is like a dark bar, and the rest has like a dark streak on the shaft, and otherwise it looks quite white. But you can see that the feathers are much more bleached and lighter brown. You can see the white part of the feathers they braid first. I think we already talked about that because there's no melanin in them, so they're less stable. So you can see a lot of missing parts, especially in tertiary side. They're really like serrated there. Yeah, and then so they only mold this, and they do that usually in September and in August and September. So already in autumn you see the birds like this, and then they stop molting again until they're complete molt. It starts in the end of April mostly May. Then the next molt cycle, that's the yellow-leg gull, Michaelis, that's Carinans, the Caspian gull, but also the southern Graelsi. So, and that just means that they molt a few more colors. So you can see here, this is all pictures in winter. Okay, this is April, but the mold was from winter. And so the birds will already look like this in December. They did it, nothing changed there. And you can see here, there's some molded feathers. The greater coverts, I think also tertius, you can see something here. There's some coverts also molded here, that's the yellow-leg gull, Michaelis. And then if you look here, they've also here darker feathers with this white, that's also molded feathers. And they are already quite abraded. You can see the new feathers are already born because they've been renewed in autumn. And now the pictures from April, so they're already like half a year old. And it's also quite a good indicator. Yes, so that's also something you would look for in a young yellow-leg gull, that they have a more extensive mold. And it also is because they live further south, so they have more time to mold in winter. Also, they need to do it more because the sun is much stronger, so yeah. Second generation feathers born in spring. You can see that here. Then we get to the interesting types, which is another example, same mold type, and it almost all looks new. This is the yellow-leg gull from Spain. So all of this has been renewed in autumn, and here, whatever go, there's still some juvenile feathers there, which you can basically not see. They're completely covered, but it just show that some of them are so extensive in their mold, that they mold a lot of everything. But that would only be in birds in southern Spain. So if we like go here, it will never look like this probably. But it will be more like a bird from Germany, which just molds a few wing coverts more. And they never like this mold type always only includes like coverts and stuff. It never includes tail or primaries or anything. It's just coverts. But it can be quite extensive in this case. And also a bird like this. Yes, and then we get to where it gets interesting, and that's the Scandinavian intermediate birds. So it's about lesser black gulls now, small black ones, and also the rare Gull, and they have a rather extensive mold in winter, so they migrate quite far, and then they spend their winter in Morocco for the intermediates mostly, or for the Hagini in that case, and also Western Europe and the Arabian Peninsula, and then they have a lot of time there and like food and everything is nice and sun, so they have a lot of time to mold a lot of stuff. So I guess the difference is now that they also mold the secondaries and sometimes the tail, or actually often the tail, and some of them even a few primaries. And when they come back in spring, then also the molded feathers, they are in a very good state because they are much younger than the ones that the other mold types where they replaced it already in, let's say, September. So and these feathers might be from March before they migrate back to the breeding grounds. And yeah, secondary mold is unique for this mold type. But we can do even more. And by the way, these oil spots are not identifiable because they're not different enough. But the Fuscus, the Baltic gull, and some Hagini, like I think it's 10 to 50% of the Hagini gull, they also mold the primaries, and that makes them identifiable actually. So we can only identify the Hagini gull that have molded primaries in spring because it differs that much. And so they also, they usually don't mold any feathers in autumn. They stay in complete juvenile plumage. So also if you have like a silverback gull, which is in complete juvenile plumage, let's say in end of October or November, it's actually quite interesting because all the others have molded some feathers already. But these don't do that. They stay in juvenile plumage and then they migrate really far to to West Africa, and then they have complete molds. And in Fuscus always includes the complete plumage, and in Hagini's gull some of the primaries. And it's also a special thing for Hagini's gull that they often do it in a random order. You can see there's still like 2 primaries left here and also here, and it doesn't even need to be symmetrical. So sometimes they have like, I don't know, weird stuff in the primaries. But if they're multi-primaries, then it's very distinctive, and we can also identify them. Because the problem with Fuscus is that the very eastern intermediates, they can mold similar, and they can look similar. So there we cannot really be sure. But because Hagini's has a very grey back, you can see here, they're most similar to the grey Ilse, lesser black gulls, and they have like a very small mold, or like a very low mold extent. So that's why we can identify them if they mold primaries, because that is not possible for the grey Ilse gulls who would have the same back color. Mm-hmm. So in that case, we can identify a Hagini's gull. It's just an overview about the complete mold in summer. They start with replacing some coverts and also the P1, the first primary.
P1 you say from the in?
Yeah, from the in outwards. Yes, so they start in the middle of the inner center, and then they mold outwards until P10, and when they reach P7, then they start their secondary mold, and also the mold of the tail feathers of the red prices after they mold P7. In parallel, they just do random stuff with the wing covers. Yes. And then there is a partial mold in autumn where they mold some more smaller wing covers and stuff. But it often overlaps with the complete molds, like it's in August. So usually they didn't even finish their complete mold and already start with the partial mold, so it's not really differentiable. But in theory, it's a second partial mold. Yes. And then again, the exception with these Baltic gulls and the Hagini's gulls is if you want to, like in autumn, you can actually identify Baltic gulls with othering. because the molt extent is different. Baltic gulls after the first year, so like second or third, fourth calendar year, they in summer in the complete molt they only molt 1 to 2 primaries, when all others make complete molt. And then they migrate to the wintering quarters and there they make complete molt. So they sort of suspend their molt. And if you look at gulls in September, which is the main migration period for the Baltic gulls, then they would have molted 1 to 2 inner primaries, and usually the other gulls would have been at least at this 5th or 6th primary. So if you see a dark leatherback gull, which is small, long-winged, everything fits, and they have only molted the innermost 2 primaries in September, then that's a Baltic gull, and you can submit it to the Rarities Committee. Yeah.
Do you know when they usually arrive at the normal winter quarters, the Baltic gulls?
I don't know yet, but I don't think it takes too long. I think October probably the first birds. Like they start their migration in early September, and then you can see them. Like the island where I was in Eastern Germany is the best place for them in Germany. We always get them on the migration period, and we get them all September, mostly until mid of September. So I would guess they arrive. The first birds arrive in end of September, early October. Yeah, and then they spend all winter there, and they have time for complete molt, and then they come back. Yeah. And like I said, Hornets Gull has this random replacement primaries. But this is not so important for us because they're about rare birds. But it's nice to know about the smallest differences because we also read not know. Yeah, and now about the identification chapter. Before we can identify a bird, we need to first age it because the age class looks so different. It makes no sense to just say, this bird is white-headed, so it must be Caspian, or if it's a fur calendar, then they're all white-headed, right? So, first we need to age it, we need to be very sure about the age before we can identify it. And then we always need to use a combination of several features, there's never only one reliable feature. Yes. Then also you should keep in mind not every bird is possible to identify, only the most characteristic individuals. Luckily here it means most of the birds. But if you live close to a hybridization zone, then you get many hybrids and weird birds, and there's no way to be sure about that. And also some birds are just difficult, and it's just best to be careful. Yes, there's some important features are, for example, head and bill shape, extent of streaking in head and body. So that's yes, and also like general size, body proportion. For example, if you compare lesser black gull with greater black gull, that's quite a difference, right? And that you can also see in the fields, also like this size, for example. Then for juvenile birds, or birds with still juvenile feathers, it can be quite important to look at the pattern of the tail feathers, the retrices. Under upper tail coverts, power strings, that patterns, and very important rear tail coverts, and also tertials a bit. And then if you look at the wing in adults, the pattern of the outer primaries is very important, like this black and white pattern is very useful for identification. And also in juveniles, the inner primaries are usually a bit lighter colored, and that also differs between the species and can be used also for identifying them in flight. And then also we talk a little about molt, and also molt is important for identification. Yeah, we had this already. So I think I will skip this, but yeah, remember I'm talking about here greater covers, medium covers, lesser covers. And so this is in fresh juvenile plumage, probably like August or something, and then many birds we get here, when we get them, let's say in March, they look like this. So they've also molted here, these feathers, you can see that what I call anchor pattern, they have like this dark tip of the feather, and the dark shaft, and the rest is white, so it's like an anchor sort of, right? And this is the typical pattern for the second generation feathers. You can see that all of these feathers are very worn, there's so much missing here.
Yes.
Bird is for March here.
There's no white tips.
So just to also show you how abraded the birds are, like after half a year, a bit more even. And also need to remember, if they molt the other coverts, they will also get this anchor pattern. So they don't have this nice regular white and brown pattern anymore, they get this anchor pattern outside rear. So it's quite easy, the pattern is really different between first generation feathers and second generation feathers. head shape and pattern. Depends a lot on age and season, of course. Most adult birds also have a winter plumage where they get streaks on the head. It also depends on different species how extensive that is. But this is mostly useful for juvenile immature birds. Then what else we can look at the head is also distribution. For example, we can see here herring gull, they have very streaked head overall, everywhere. And then what is good feature also for yellow-legged gulls is that they often have a rather white head, but the streaking is concentrated around the eye, so they have like sort of this dark eye mask, dark area around the eye iris that is rather light. It's very typical for the yellow-legged gulls. And then also bill shape, of course, and coloration, especially in older birds. But you can also see some differences here already. It's like a nice comparison. So herring gulls, they have a rather strong bill, or they have, we can say, the basic rich bill. And then yellow-legged gulls, they have a bit stronger usually than the herring gulls, but the difference is quite fine. It's a small difference, but it's there. So you can especially see like the lower mandibles like really a bit stronger. They have quite a heavy bill. And then usually leatherback gulls, you also need to imagine these are quite a bit smaller than the other two usually, but they have a very short, fine bill. Yes, but this is also something you need to get used to. It doesn't seem too most obvious now.
I see it here.
Yeah, and then we also have head shape, especially for yellow-legged gulls, quite useful. You can see that the herring gull often has a rather rounded head with a peak, like the highest point sort of over the eye, and the yellow-legged gulls, they often have this blocky head, and then often the highest point is behind the eye. But they at least have this like square triangle head. There are also some herring gulls who can also share this head shape a bit, especially like I think male, like the really large and bulky ones, they can also have this very square head. But that's typical shape of a yellow-legged gull, that's what you're looking for. So like the sort of triangular head shape, bulky head. Yeah, some more pictures also of the other species. All the pictures I will show, we will always have the herring gull uncast in the up left corner, then we have the caminants, the caspian gull, the leatherback gull, and then here we will always have the yellow-legged gull. And this would be an example of a very round-headed and probably also very small herring gull, probably a female bird then. Females are a bit smaller, males are a bit larger, but it's not really something you can have to find if it's more if you have them together in a pair. And you can already see that there's like streaking everywhere, quite regular. And the caspian gull, they have a really light head, like it's clean white in their first year in the juvenile plumage, but they have this streaking in the neck which forms sort of color, and that's very, very typical for caspian gull. That's what you look for. They're actually rather distinct species. So we have white heads and streaking in the neck, and only in the neck, and it forms this neck color. That's one of the most important features of caspian gull. And then of course the rather long slender bill. I think if you compare this, you can already see the difference there. Also the lower mandible is not very strong. This jaundice egg, I think, like this. What do you call it? This bump there. That's also a bit soft, like not as strong as in the other gulls, you can see. And then also the forehead is not very steep, so it's very elongated head and very white and streaks in the neck. Then leatherback gulls, they're quite small, and then they have very rounded heads with a short bill, so you can do like you can circle around it almost. And then what we talked about with the yellow-legged gulls, they have this square head, triangular. It's very white overall, they don't have much streaking usually, and then this dark eye mask, so it's like darkest around the eye. And because the other part of the rest of the head is quite light, that stands out a bit. Yeah.
The bill there is a bit yellow. Is that
Yeah. That's quite variable. I think you probably could see a herring gull with that bill coloration, but in general, the yellow-legged gulls are a bit more advanced there. So, but you don't necessarily expect this of a yellow-legged gull. They can also have complete dark bill. But I think they're overall a bit more advanced. Then tail pattern in first-hand birds. I made this table, or you can also just look at the pictures if you want. But in general, here's a few things you look for, and maybe I can switch between the pictures and this. So in the birds you have this dark band on the end of the tail, the subterminal band, and that differs in shape between the species. So in the herring gull, it's evenly broad. Also in Cathinans, it's evenly broad. In Fuscus, it's a bit narrow, and then there's a very good identification feature for Michaelis. It's thick in the middle and narrow on the tail sides. So if you look at these two, the Caspian gull and Tatus, the herring gull, they have a rather broad tail band. Then Fuscus, often a bit narrow, but it's quite similar. And then very important for the yellow gull, it's here very broad and it gets quite narrow to the sides. So often when you want to identify a juvenile first cycle yellow gull, then you usually want to see the tail. So that's a very good feature. And also, what else we can look for is how is the transition from the black tail band to the white in the tail. And you can see, for example, here in herring gulls there's often not much white, like the markings go all the way to the upper tail coverts. The Caspian gull has a bit more white already, also lesser black gull has a little white, and also yellow gull has a lot of white. So that's already, if there's a lot of white in the tail feathers, it's already not so good for the herring gull. And then they have many large dark markings going all the way in. So that's like large, blotchy, irregular markings. And then if you compare it to Caspian gulls, it's a bit more regular. It's like these nice sort of lines going up. Lesser gull is rather similar in that extent, but the species are quite different in other features. And then in Michaelis, in the yellow gull, it's quite a clean cut. You can see like this weird markings here, but it's very quick transition into rather white feathers. So what we look for in the tail of a yellow gull is dark tail band, very clean cut to the white in the tail, also a lot of white in general on the tail sides, and then like the tail band is broadest in the middle and gets narrow to the sides. That's what you want to see. And in this case you can also look at the upper tail coverts. So also rather light upper tail coverts, often the same, lesser because it's a bit variable. Also Caspian gull of course, and herring gulls are the most among birds in that extent, so a bit darker.
I have a tail feather that I found here. I wonder if we can.
Yeah. Look at the tail, we can have got something. Extent of white in tail just talked about, so it gets more and more Michaelis. And yeah, upper tail covered, we talked about that. You wanna?
No,
yeah, we are also. I can send you the presentation.
Yeah.
Good. Then I said greater coverts are very important, and also the tertius can be quite important for especially for young birds, of course, because later they're all white. And I think I will jump again between the pictures and this. But first we look at the greater cover barring, and that's one of the first features I look for if I want to see if is this gull like just herring gull or is there something weird going on. And also if I want to pick out like special birds, then I just scan the greater covers basically, if it's not already like sticking out through its head shape and white head or anything. So the classic, this is like the basic greater covers pattern we have here, and you can see that it has. So like this is the greater covers, here the medium cover starts. So we look at this, and they have these regular dark markings, then white and dark, and it builds, like it forms these rows, very regular rows. And usually you have like 3 dark rows and like 3 white rows, something like it's a very coarse pattern. And then if you like a Caspian gull, in the greater covers, they have often, but can you tell me where the outer and where the inner greater covers are in the bird?
Outer and inner?
Yeah, what is close when the wing spread from which part of the greater covers is the closest to one?
They fold their wing
They
differently.
would
right?
be the outer ones?
Yes,
That would be
yes, because they fold the wing, so that you need to know. And usually what you look for is dark outer greater covers. Right now I made a mistake. You can see also lesser greater gull has dark outer greater covers, and also yellow leg gull has dark outer greater covers. So the only species that doesn't have it is the herring gull. So the normal one. They have this barring throughout the greater covers. Yes.
Yeah.
So then Caspian gull has this very plain dark. It's now already quite warm bird. It's from spring at some point, I think, or maybe from February with the snow. And then they get this rather fine pattern here, and often, like now this is getting dark here again, but often the fine pattern goes all the way. But dark inner and like very fine pattern compared to like these bold rows of dark and white markings. And then these two species there have the same pattern with red colors. And also lesser-legged gull and yellow-legged gulls, they're sort of the most difficult to separate if you get them in, let's say, December and still mostly juvenile plumage. Of course, now in spring, for example, lesser-legged gulls, they have like dark feathers on the mantle because they already molted some there, and yellow-legged gulls doesn't have. Yes, they have like, they also get a grey back. But what you see here then, compared to the Caspian gull, they also have dark inner outer grey coverts, and then they have the same coarse barring or a similar coarse barring to the herring gull, like with these dark white and black markings that form these rows. Yes. And tertius one I want to talk about. All these birds I picked. First, I thought I made this presentation in March, so I picked all pictures birds in March, but of course they were worn, so maybe it would have been a bit easier if you have nice birds. But you can see here that you have dark brown tertius, and the things that are missing now, that's the white notches, because herring gull usually has like white, a lot of white notches on the side of the tertius. So wherever there's like something missing in this valley, you just need to imagine there's a white spot now. And then very typical for almost all the other species, especially though Caspian gull and lesser-legged gull, is that the tertius are really like nice and plain brown, and then only at the tip they get a bit lighter, but just like diffusely light, and have this dark shaft streaks. You can see it's like a bit of dark shaft streak, but like overall very plain brown. So it's very different to this. Yes, and also they have the same. You can see the shaft streak a bit better. And then off the yellow gull, they have a bit more bloodshot white spots on the tip of the tertius. Yeah, so they differ a bit again, but they also have overall more uniform dark tertius than herring gull, for example. Yeah, more in detail. We talked about it. That's the herring gull anectatus. So it's a different bird than we had before. Do you know what it is? You can also just read it. Yes, but this would be very warm birds. But you can still see uniformly dark outer red covered. See, it's a bit difficult to judge.
That is the same cycle.
You can see, yes, and it's just most molded molt. Because if you remember, these were mold type free, so they also mold some of the covers, and they have a more extensive mold than herring gull on average.
Right.
So that's also why there's already some grey shades here. And the tertius had this uniform brown. And then lesser-legged gull, that's a bit easier to see here, dark outer, and then it's regularly barred white, dark inner greater covers. Yeah, and overall I think you can see from here there's a lot of small birds with this round head, short bill. Cute. And that's what I meant with the yellow-legged gull. Because they have also like rather brown, and then they have this weird smudgy white spots to the tertius. Yeah, and this is also a very warm bird again. You can see also this coarse white and dark rows on the grey coats, and they can sometimes go quite far out. So sometimes you mostly see this pattern quite similar to herring gull, and then only the very inner ones here are dark. Yes. Again, a comparison of all of them, despite we already did quite a few, but here another Caspian gull, white head, streaks in the neck, slender bill, like really plain white. Also the body's very plain white, only with some marks on the side flanks. Tertius are largely brown, just with this lightish tip. Also difference you can see here a bit is the leg length, so Caspian gulls have longer legs than herring gull. You can see they have a short leg here, and this one's a bit more slender and longer leg and everything. And also Caspian gulls often get, they're like a bit of more of an advanced molt in their first year. So that means that they sometimes even mold some of the coverts here, but also the feathers they mold on the back often get grayer, while often the herring gulls when you get this anchor pattern you can see here. That's also variable, it's just like in general a bit more grey appearance quite fast. Also this bird more or less, that's a back gull again. You look at the greater cover pattern. Also a lot of markings usually on the head and the breast, quite dark birds. round head. And then again, a yellow like gull. Here you can see the rows with dark outer red covers, tertiary pattern. And they are also rather light breasted sort of, and especially the head is quite white. You can see that the eye, again, or the eye surrounding is the darkest part of the head again. The bill is quite heavy and it also has this triangular head shape a bit. So this is still first cycle birds, and then we can also identify them in flight. And so one of the most important features in flight is the inner primaries, because they differ quite a lot there. And if you look at the herring gull here, you can see that they form like a light panel in here. So like there's the light inner primaries and then darkish outer primaries. And this is also quite similar in Caspian gull. They have a bit of a less obvious light panel in here. It's this birds that spread more, so you see more light parts of the feathers. But usually Caspian gull has a bit of a dark, more like uniformly dark primaries. And then especially herring gull and ear-like gull, they almost don't have this white sort of window in the inner primaries. And that you can also see in flight. So if you look at first cycle large gulls and they don't have this white inner primary window sort of, and it's not a great black gull, then probably it's either lesser black gull or yellow gull. So they have like dark inner primaries compared to light inner primaries of a herring gull. And that you can actually see quite well in flight. Just you also should be sure you to see that too. The herring gull again, you can see this white window overall, like also very dark body and streaks up and under the tail covers, a lot of streaking on around the head, and then also you can see the barring of the vertical covers here. And a window in the primaries. Caspian gull, to compare, they also have quite an obvious panel here, and also maybe you remember from seeing it, but they also have the medium and lesser coverts, also the greater coverts, because they're all dark here, and also medium and lesser coverts are darker, so the windows overall more uniformly brown, because there's less white markings than herring gull. And of course you see the head pattern, it's quite white, slender bill, streaks in the neck, and also lighter upper tail coverts than herring gull. So that's all feedback you can easily identify them in flight. Then also underwing is quite useful for them. Herring gull has a darkish underwing, you can see here quite dark underwing coverts, and Caspian gull has a lighter underwing. With only like these darkish rows, but rather light. Also the body of course is a bit lighter than a herring gull. Then we have the lesser red gull, and I think in this picture you can maybe even see it better that they are quite uniformly dark. It's only very slightly lighter in the inner primaries. Also overall very dark birds. You can also see the outer verticals are very dark, and yeah. So that's a red gull, and in that feature the yellow gulls are very similar, so they also almost have no lighter inner primaries, and also rather dark wing overall. Again, you can see here the dark eye surrounding, rather light head, heavy bill, and then very clean cut between the dark tail band and the white of the tail. And if the tail would be spread a bit nicer, then you can also see the shape with the narrow sides of the tail band and the thick middle of the tail. Another yellow light gull, you can see the shape a bit better, so narrow outer tail band, thickest inner one, very clean cut between the white and the dark. That's very difficult for them. Also, like if the wing spread more, then you see like more of the light parts, so that's why it looks a bit lighter here. But in general, if you just look at the outer vein of the fin, then there's not really a wide window there. And you can also see that it has dark outer greater coverts here, or uniformly dark. And also it's a bit difficult on this picture, but I cannot really see it. But there's also more than some wing covers. I think that's the ones with the bit darker center now. It's difficult to see in this quality of the picture. Yes, now we reach second cycle, so you can see everything is molted, and especially if you look at the greater coverts, you have, on all of them, you have this fine, irregular barring on the greater coverts, and also what I meant with anchor pattern, you can see it that now they don't have these regular dark and white spots anymore, but on the tip of the feather there's always like a dark end of the feather, and often like a bit of a dark shaft in the middle of the feather, and the feathers are largely white. The second generation, there's some medium coverts in mantle. Yes.
It's the second cycle, right?
Yes.
So here is actually third calendar year.
This would be third calendar year birds we saw now this spring. That's third calendar year. Yes. But of course, they already look like this in the second calendar year autumn. So that's why we usually do it in cycles, because it's much more precise. Yes. Yes. And we already talked about the mold extent, so you can see that the herring gull is like the least advanced. You still see a lot of anchor pattern up here. So even after it's complete mold, it didn't really get much of silverish feathers, but it's also variable. You will also find some herring gulls with silver feathers there. And then of course, like all this very fine pattern compared to first cycle birds. So
The greater cover here, is it a mold limit sort of half or not?
no, they're all because it was complete mold, so they really most everything.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
And so that's also you start with the juvenile feathers, and then it's sort of 2 stages more to reach the grey feathers. So first juvenile feathers, then they get this anchor pattern everywhere on the body, sort of, and then they have the grey feathers. And sometimes they just skip the anchor pattern, just immediately more to the grey feathers. But in general, first juvenile feathers, then anchor pattern. On the tertiaries, you will see it with just many of these white markings, and that's sort of second generation feathers. And then third generation feathers would be the grey feathers. And you can see the Caspian gull, for example, they mold a lot of their feathers into third generation feathers already. So if you get a second cycle Caspian gull, which would be a third calendar year now, then they already look much more advanced on average, and with a higher percentage of grey feathers. You can see it here also, these are like rather like darkish grey, dirty grey, and then also tertiaries are grey. Yes, so that's also, and you can also see, for example, the herring gull. There's also other examples, but this one is also a bit lighter than most in their first cycle, of course, so the feature is not that useful anymore, but it's still different. And also in this age class, you can still see that the streaking on the head of the Caspian gull is really mostly focused on the neck of the bird. So that's in every plumage a good feature for Caspian gull, white head and streaking, like building this scarf sort of around the neck. That's a very important thing to remember. Then all the lesser black gulls, they usually, when they come back in spring, then they have molted black feathers that jet dark, so that's a lesser black gull. After that, it's not really difficult to identify them, but you can see the mold here. So this would be an intermediate birds. Yes, what the black color. And
so that, like the Caspian gull and the yellow leg gull, they look super much the same.
Yeah, so yeah. So these are that's the two, but they already stand out between the herring gulls, right?
Yeah.
Because they have like this lighter body.
Yes.
So that's what you're looking for. Usually you look for, they would stand out. But of course, from the standard Caspian gull to the thick-billed yellow leg gull, there's usually a difference visible. On these pictures it doesn't really appear that much though, I agree. And then of course they share the same white plumage, but that's like Caspian gull usually has this rather plain white head with the streaks in the neck, and in yellow leg gull it's more spread over the body, overall very white, and then like this dark eyes around. And also head shape is rather different. Like in this position it's a bit difficult with the Caspian gull, but if it would stand up then you would have a rather rounded head here, and like a rather not very steep forehead and a long bill, and still this one is a rather blocky head. Yes.
It helps that its photo is from Spain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw it here, it would be so super.
But
it's also the most difficult.
Like, I don't think I would. Yeah, the most difficult ones. But I don't think I would call it a Caspian gull, and it's clearly not a herring gull. So I think that one would stand out.
I think maybe the smudge around the eye
Yeah,
compared to the cashmere that has this neck color.
yeah. I think I don't think I have better pictures now of this age class, but
What are the turtles?
often because the cashmere girls like looking down, now, it's a bit annoying. But usually different. Also, in build shape is more pronounced.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the turtle pattern.
Yeah, the
that was
turtles,
different.
because
Yes.
the Caspian now has the grey ones, but
Yeah, but that's very variable. You will also find yellow girls with that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, if you remember when I told you about the mold types, and then there was this yellow girl from Spain who like almost everything molded.
true.
Also, the same goes after the complete mold. You can get ones that are almost completely gray. What is unique for this age class, though, was a very important aging feature, is if you look at the primary tips, because even though they're a complete mold, so the primaries have been molded once now, they're still completely brown. There's no white tips, and this will change after the next mold. So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now we have the slide. Third cycle birds. So this is sort of after the next mold. So they get rather grey appearance, and then they also start to get these white tips on the tip of the primaries, and that's only after the second mold. So that would be a fourth calendar bird now in spring, and after the mold it could also be first calendar. Like now they started the mold, so yeah. But first cycle birds are the first to gain these white tips in the primaries. So let's say if we're in March, then it doesn't really matter much how much grey the bird has in its plumage. If the primaries are still dark, uniform dark white tips, then it's a third calendar year bird, calendar year. And if it has already white tips, then it will be a fourth calendar year. So that's a rather simple question. But of course, if you look for example at Lesbian Gull, they can also wear off, so they need to be aware. There's only very slight markings, and also I think in the beginning when they had this herring gull where you could see like greater covers, lesser covers, then they also had quite white markings on the primaries, but it was just because the feathers were very fresh. It's just like sort of white fringes to the feathers, not really white markings. Also these were off rather fast, but you just need to be sure that it's actually white tips to the feathers, not just white fringes or that they're not worn off. And then usually in that plumage they only have one white mirror in the feathers here, and not the adult type wing pattern. And yes, what else points to the species? It's in winter, so now also the winter plumage of the adults starts to show a bit. So in the winter, the herring gulls, they get a lot of streaking on the head. So you can see here it has like this streaked hood. It's very typical for herring gull. Caspian gulls never really gets that. They stay plain white, and sometimes in this age class they still have this scarf at most. But beside that, they look very plain white. And yeah, that's a because that's a red gull by now. I don't need to talk about that. But also the yellow gull, they also don't get the streaking in the head. So they often don't have streaking in the head plumage. Immature birds, of course, still can have like this immature streaking. I think also sometimes even that age class. But then it's again focused on the eye, and it's not season related in that case. But like if you also get an adult bird later, then really the only one with a lot of streaking on the head is the herring gull. Caspian gull is usually plain white, and also your lake gull does not have streaking or just very little in winter. So they also have largely white head. Yeah, standing birds now fourth cycle. So, for example, if you look at that's a very gull, the only immature on this bird is the bill. That's often what they keep there. So these dark markings. That's a sign of immaturity. Then you have this herring gull, which basically looks like this would be a fifth calendar year in March. Looks adult. You just have a few dark markings here. What you often see in flying birds is that they have still like some primary colors, or like a lula in this case, with brown markings. That's the last bit where you see brown markings, which is quite useful for aging them. And if you look also at this yellow gull, you can see this feather here. This primary color should be grey in an adult bird. But this is quite different because some birds they look like adult birds in that case. So this fourth cycle plumage you would call usually subadult, or now we would call it 5 calendar year plus because it's not really to be sure. It's not also an older bird. But if you see these dark markings, then you can call them 5th calendar year because then you know that they're immature. But if you don't see them, it doesn't mean that they're not 5th calendar year because they could also just be an advanced 5th calendar year. So.
Yeah, because like the difference from almost all passerines and the gulls are, and also rabbits, like it's not juvenile feathers they have left.
No,
they
it's-
have been
yeah.
changed 1-2 times, but they just have dark markings when they're immature.
Yeah, and also depending on the hormones and everything, or how good the bird is at getting food, they more or less, or like get in more advanced, like, so, yes. But if you would see this now in March, let's say, or April, then you would call this, or even now, then you would call this silver-billed birds, or 5th calendar year. You can also probably call it 5th calendar year. If you don't show it, you just look at it, then you would probably say 5K plus.
Yes.
And you can also see a bit that the yellow color is the darkest grey in the back of these three.
What about the little black dark splotching on the desert leopard? On the head?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
I think it's also some sort of winter plumage, but also some of them also get like dark or that. But at that point they have a jet black, so
They would be very
and also
curious.
yeah, also what's good for an immature bird now, maybe also a bit of winter plumage. So the legs are not very bright yellow. If you remember, mostly that's how because now we get a very bright yellow. But that's for once can also be immaturity. But I think also in winter they have like less bright yellow legs, and with the hormones, then in the breeding season they get very bright yellow legs.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know how useful that is for aging, but maybe it's also more sort of a winter plumage thing. Yes, and then they basically look the same. Also, this would be a Baltic gull. So you see that it's completely uniform, really dark. There's almost no difference between the wingtip, which is just a dark pattern, and the rest of the back. And then they only have one very small white mirror on P10. They can also have a second white mirror on P9, but this is sort of the most characteristic, but just as a side fact. Yeah, that's all the images compared. Again, yellow gull is the darkest. They have this Caspian gull, of course, with a dark eye. And then also, what is useful a bit for identifying yellow gulls, of course, the yellow legs, which some herring gulls also have, though. And then they have this very red orbital ring, which can be seen in close range sometimes. But also herring gull has an orange one, and sometimes a bit more red, so it's only additional feature. And then, of course, a strong bill, and sometimes in the red spot here goes on the upper mandible. That would also be a bit of a feature for yellow leg, but it's not so useful. But if you get these adult birds instead of maybe through the yellow legs, for example, then you want to have a wing picture, and then you see the wing pattern, which we'll talk about in a moment, and then you can identify the adult birds by that feature. Yes. But yeah, again for the Caspian gull, slender bill, not very steep forehead, and dark eye, but yeah. Actually, on this bird you can even see with dark marks on the bill, so it's not even breeding adult, but probably 15 year. And you need to be a bit careful because some birds, it was proven that they even keep like dark marks in the bill until their 8th calendar year or something like all life. But that's quite an exception, so I think you can still say 5th calendar year, or you can also just call it 5th calendar year type and just say 4+ or something if you want to be extra safe. Yes, and then if they stand, that's like a very small feature you can use for identifying them. And it should also be used as an additional feature, but maybe it's an eye catcher. Is if you see sort of the underwing pattern, and then there's a bit of a difference here, like the Caspian gull has like this nice angle here, if you see the underwing pattern. Herring gull, the ones we get here, the Argentatus subspecies, they have like this weird broken angle. And then the western herring gulls, again toys which are not common here, and also yellow gulls, they have a lot of black here, so you don't really see anything there. But that's, if you see it in close, it's just like a small extra trick to identify them. It's not the most important. And if you want to look at the wing, so that's very important now for the adult birds. And usually what's important is the white markings on P10 and 9, how they look like. Then the extent of black in the wingtip, so often how far does the black go up to the primary coats on the outer primaries, and then also how many primaries have black. And in herring gull it is only so it's only, most of the time it's only 5 primaries with black, and sometimes they have a bit of black on the D6 too. So we would go like 10 black, 9, 8, 7, 6 and 5, and then there's a bit of the dark on the outer vein, and a very small darker spot there in the inner vein. But it's not a complete band. And then if you look at Caspian gulls and yellow-leg gulls, they have like complete dark band on P5. Also here, this is P5, so a lot of dark, and that herring gull never shows really, or very rarely. And then often yellow-leg gulls even have a bit of dark on P4. But what you want to look for first, as the first feature you look for is how many primaries have dark, and in herring gull it is usually 5, and if it's on the 6th then it's just like a bit broken band there, not a complete band. And Caspian gull and yellow-leg gulls have a complete band here. And the next thing you can look for is the extent of black reaching to the primaries. It's quite similar in the Caspian gull and the herring gull. So it's like on the outer 2 primaries it reaches the primary coverts, and then there's like sort of grey coming down, and in yellow-leg gull there's a bit more black reaching further up. So especially if you look at P8, then in the yellow-leg gull the dark goes quite far up until here, and if you would look at P8, to be careful here, on the herring gull then there's more grey coming down here. So there's more dark yellow-leg gull than in the herring gull. And then what's typical for Caspian gulls is also that they have this grey tongues going quite far down here. So there's a lot of grey coming down here. Now the wings also a bit spread, but you can still see there's like really like the greys like coming down into the wing pattern. Yeah. And then so this would be a typical wingtip of a herring gull, like a small white spot here and a large white spot here, but often with a small band. And then usually yellow-leg gull has one white spot here, and then often only a very small white spot here that doesn't go over the complete feather. And then for Caspian gull, it's typical that they have, on P10 they have a very long white tip, which is usually not broken by a band, and then also a rather large spot on P9 that also goes over both veins of the feather, sort of. That's the features you look for in the primaries. But that's where you get the picture, and then you look at the picture, and then you look at the book, and then you compare the features. So you don't really need to do it in the field, you just see a conspicuous bird and you take the pictures and do it later. But you can also see them, if you get used to it, then you can also see, for example, in yellow-leg gull in flight, that they're more black in the wingtip than herring gull, and you already get suspicion of that. Yeah, and now we have another bird here, the Equator black gull. It's also a very common species here. So I didn't include it in the first comparisons because they're very different, and so it was easier to compare the others. But of course we also want to be able to identify them. There's no subspecies there. They breed mostly in Scandinavia. There's also some breeding in like Western Europe, but most of them breed in Scandinavia. And again, some birds stay at the coast here, for example, the Norwegian coast, but Baltic Sea and also a bit of inland colonies stay winter like somewhere else on the coast. They're the largest gull of the world. They're really large, and like I said, partial migrants. Some stay at the coasts and some migrate to different shores. This would be a very typical birds. They're all very typical, and almost the best feature for them is that they have this very fucking large bill. So in all plumages they're quite easy to pick out. And also this bird, for example, they have very white heads and often also like this dark isoron. So maybe that might be eye-catching for a yellow-leg gull, but then if you just look at the bill, and also the size, usually if they're standing in a group, then they really stand out for the size, then you can see that this is a greater black gull. Also white plumage, often very contrasting, like I think the brown parts of the feathers, they are a bit darker than the most other species you can see here. This is also now in, say, March or April, like in spring, what did I say here? I didn't write it. So all the feathers are a bit bleached and worn, but if you compare it to this bird, what species is it? You know species? Yes.
Yeah.
Then you can see this one's even lighter, like that brown, more bleached. Yes, and you can also compare the bill shape, and also if you look at the hat now, in spring, they all bleach, so also this one has a rather light hat.
But at first glimpse, they can sometimes be
You would call the yellow-leg gull, yes.
misidentified. Yeah, or even
But then you...
but
on the white head feature, sort of.
Yes,
but
because of the white head.
yeah.
And then
If
those
you
that are not so white-headed, and if you catch them also,
Yeah, then
they can be very difficult to distinguish from herringbirds.
yeah, because you can also look at the critical pattern and everything, and of course in the hands often you could just have a complete different experience than if you look through the scope, and then the bill shape is probably a bit difficult to judge. But I guess then just measure the wing and have another
Yeah,
look
but
at
the wing is not enough sometimes.
yeah. But I think it's possible. Also,
It's possible.
if with some experience, then maybe if you look at the bill shape, then you can.
And if you have pictures, then it also looks like
Also, they usually don't molt any back feathers in winter. Many of the ones we get here in complete juvenile plumage. This picture is probably from France, I think. Yeah. So that would be the southern population of the river gulls, and they also molt their mental scapulars. You can see in winter these have this anchor pattern, so they've been molted, and that was already last autumn, so they're already worn.
Yeah.
You can see that now. Let's say the pictures from March. That would fit very well. Then when they get older, they of course get these dark feathers on the mantle, and then they're very different from all the others. So also of course lesser back gull has also dark on the back, but if you remember, they are the small skulls and these are the larger skulls, so that's quite a difference. Yeah. Now we have a quiz. Yes, or just some cases so you can train a bit, and we can also go out for calling later. I took this picture last year in November, I think, in the Granny. So mostly herring gulls we have here with the grey back, and then yeah, maybe you can point out some greater black gulls. Yes, very
This should
strong.
also be one.
This is one, yes.
Yeah.
This one we can't really see, but just by
He's
size.
tall.
Yeah, that's
Very,
yeah.
very
So
tall.
usually if you also look at the group, then the head sticking out, that's the greater black gulls.
They're taller than everyone else.
And all the others you can see herring gulls with this regular
Yes.
vertical pattern, and overall like a lot of streaking on the head and everything. So, and also then they are of course in winter plumage, so you can see that they have like streaking here, and also this one is a bit more extreme. There's the variation with a lot of streaking on the head.
Also darker bill.
Yeah, it's probably not completely every bird,
Yeah.
but nowadays it was difficult to see
Mm.
all the patterns. Yes.
Okay.
Now tell me.
Okay.
And when you say a species, you also need to explain all the features you see in it.
Why?
We don't do widgets. Great, a couple of tertials. First age, by the way.
Could it be second cycle?
So everything was molted once. Or is there
So it's-
do you think it's
Yeah,
there? Do you
because-
see sort of juvenile feathers,
Yes.
or would you say there's everything has been molted? And then in that case, all the lesser medium would have this anchor pattern, and the greater coats would have this like very fine irregular spotting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that, or do you see maybe some juvenile plumage?
Okay, then I guess.
I think I see juvenile plumage with
Yeah.
some like skipped, some feathers that skip the second type, sort of.
So
Like with the grey feathers we see in the grey.
you mean that some feathers have been molted and
Mhm.
yes, it's still juvenile
Yes.
because it's yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that would be first cycle still.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea?
And what else? What other features can you see in the juvenile feathers? What did they tell you? What? How do they?
The tertials have the sort of like diffuse white
Yeah.
tip.
And a quite uniform brown,
Yes.
rather white, right?
Yeah.
So
that
what
would
can we
be-
exclude with that?
We can exclude the heron.
Yes.
Yeah, we can also exclude that
Yeah.
by the greater colors.
Yes. What
Yes.
do you see in the greater colors?
So I see a lot of brown and not the regular sort of rows we
Yeah.
get in the.
Yeah.
Especially like in the outer ones, they're completely uniform brown.
Yes.
And then here, like often many,
Yeah, they get
yeah.
sort of lighter.
Also, typical for the species is that also these are very uniform brown.
Mm-hmm.
Like overall, they're very brown. You know, species.
Mm.
But what does that? What's the head say to you in the body?
Yeah.
picture? Is it like
I'm not super sure about the head
It's
because
quite light.
it's light and it has like the
It does have a dark
scarf,
eye.
sort of, and the dark eye, but we still see some streaking, especially on the
Yes.
upper parts of the head.
Mhm.
Could it be
Um,
a Caspian?
Yes, it's a Caspian.
It is a Caspian. I was just
Also,
thinking
the
that.
whole body here is white. It's
Yeah.
very also on the
Yeah.
tail it's like quite white. So it is a white bird. Then you also have the white in the scarf. Of course,
Yes.
they can have some markings there.
Okay.
But like
Okay. So
it's important that it's overall rather white and the streaking is concentrated in the.
Mhm.
But it would make sense with then the grey feathers because they often do that, right?
Yes. Also,
Yeah.
for example,
Ah, yeah,
it
they
has
have-
noted as
yeah.
mentioned scapulus, and there are already many gray feathers in there,
Yes.
which is not a safe identification feature. Like I said, you always need to combine all the features, but that's also pointing towards Caspian Gull.
Mm.
Because like this one has immediately been replaced with a grey feather.
Mm.
And then what I said with the medium colors and lesser colors, they're also like rather uniform. And often in herring gulls, for example, it's like more white spots in between. Because it's still juvenile plumage here, but they're like so often also the Caspian gull has an overall very uniformly nicely
Yeah.
brown wing.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. So Caspian, with what age then?
You said it's still juvenile feathers, let's say it's in March.
Second calendar.
Yes, so
So
first cycle. Because it didn't have a complete molt. So
Yeah.
we always say, like in the second cycle, it's only after the second molt.
Okay.
And they do that in May to August, basically, like in
Mhm.
summer. Their first cycles. So,
Okay.
largely juvenile plumage means, yeah. So if there's a more glimpse between the scapulus and the rest of the body.
Yeah.
I want to say, call it like this.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah, I think the colors are a bit nice actually on the screen here. And the bill is of course a bit difficult to judge because it's
Yeah.
looking towards us, but it's still here. Caspian Gull in March, first of the year. First cycle, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
First
of course,
age.
Is the,
First age, yes.
Yeah.
What do you see? Do you see any immature feathers or any
I,
other?
I see
also-
fifth cycle.
Mm.
Yeah, also the bill looks.
Yeah.
Adult.
It's, yeah. There's no.
I think it's just there.
So this now is also difficult identification now, of course, because you don't really see. In this case, for safe identification, you would want to see the wing
Primary.
The open wing, sort of, yeah. But we still see leg color, which
Yeah.
would point towards herringle.
Yeah, it's rather
Yeah.
pink,
Um,
right?
Yes.
And then I can't really see, it's a bit dark, but what you
I get
said
the
about the
underwing.
angle,
Yes.
Yeah.
the
It's like-
underwing angle,
yeah.
it looks like the
It's
not
not.
so nice.
Yeah.
Like the irregular like
yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
and
I
also
can't really see it.
if you look at the head shape, it's also rather rounded.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Didn't you say also the
There's a
iris?
Highest point
Yeah, the eye.
above the eye, sort of.
and that's an adult's
Herring.
herring gull.
Could be a
Nice.
male.
How can you sex them?
It's just makes a larger and bit stronger build than the
Okay.
females.
Okay.
But usually you don't do that.
Yeah.
Usually you do it if they stand next to each other. Or if you have an extreme, then you can
Mhm.
probably say that's a male. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't be too sure about this. To call it as a male or not.
Yeah.
It could be a male, yes. It could also be a female.
Cute. Okay.
So this is a rather fresh plumage, so I would call this December. Oh, I think it's like complete juvenile plumage actually. So probably it's like August. August and this bird flies past you. So in this case.
It's like this bird flies past me.
Yellow leg monkey. Cycle.
Okay, what does tell you yelled on the bird?
I think I can see a very like the after tail feathers are a shorter tail band.
Uh-huh.
It's overall very bulky. Bill is kind of thick. It's a very dark eye mask.
So like the
After beta
Black.
coverts are a bit more uniform, dark compared to herring gull.
flash forehead. So
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what you see in the pyramids here is like a
There
strong.
is a little bit of a
A
white
little bit,
window.
yeah, they always have a little bit though,
Mm.
but it's not a strong
No.
white window, yes. And then also you can see a lot of white in the tail sides, so that
Yeah.
we would not have in the herring gull, and also the transition is quite smooth. So there's a few markings, but it's quite smooth. And then also, of course, now it has a quite dark body and head, but it's because it's juvenile plumage, so this will reach down very fast. And
Yeah.
then if you get the birds in November, let's say or October, then they're already much lighter headed and bodied. So also if you get a Caspian gull and juvenile plumage, then they also have a brown head. But that's usually you only really see that around the breeding sites.
Mm.
But the actual pitfall here is lesser black gull.
Yeah, actually before it's less of a black gull because they
Yeah.
similar like black gulls, but then similar like they don't really have a window here.
Aren't they
and
darker
it's
though?
dark.
Aren't they overall darker?
Yeah, it's not so really for lesser black gull. You want to have the size a bit, which is a bit difficult to see on this picture. Also bill, like you can see it's a bit heavy bill, but it's always a bit. But the tail pattern is most useful. So very clean cuts and narrow on the sides, and lesser black gull is more uniform and there's a bit more transition and markings. But this is supposed to be the most difficult plumage, so probably you want to have a second picture of that bird, maybe in a bit different position to say something. To really separate that species, yes.
I think if you saw this one out of Graham, then you would first think lesser black
Yes.
gull, and then
Oh, it's-
you would
Yes,
maybe,
but then-
you would maybe go to the, like the bill is heavy.
Yeah, and then also, like, because it's juvenile plumage, it doesn't stand out as much. But let's say 1 or 2 months later, then the head will be light and also the belly, and then the eye muscle will stand out more, and that also points you more towards the yellow black gull, or would be a bit eye-catching also.
So you're the first cycle.
Yes, Michaelis first cycle. And then we have here. Yeah, and the
Might we have a first cycle again?
what species? Oh yeah, what you see first cycle, I think it's juvenile plumage or
Well, it looks rather uniformly juvenile. I don't think I see much going on even on the mantle.
On the mantle, you would say there's nothing going on. Like
Is there?
usually juvenile feathers are like brown,
Yeah.
and then what is here, is it also
Yeah.
brown or is it?
Yeah,
It could be a little grey, sure.
Yeah.
gray anchor pattern.
Yeah, that's so like you almost never see them in juvenile mantle feathers,
Hmm.
but only like on the breeding side, and then they have like the same brown as on the wing.
But again, the tail looks like yellow black gull.
Yes, very very clean white cuts. This is like the other tail. Also, if you look at the other birds, there is bit markings there. So that would be in the more marked end of variation for yellow black gull. But this tail band is much more typical. So, but this was also again a bit on the extreme of the other side. So this would be a very straightforward yellow black gull with that tail, because it's a very clean
Okay.
cut between the black tail band, the brown tail band, and the white of the tail, and the very few markings there. You can again see maybe the dark eye mask and a rather heavy bill.
Is the tail different because it got molted or is it just variation?
It's just variation, yeah. So they don't molt the tail until the
No.
first complete molt.
Okay.
Except the goods, except that the gods, they have the extensive molt. They do that in winter. Yes, yellow like gull, maybe I should have written that in right. The first cycle. And it's from Denmark actually. And what do we have here?
Oh god.
First age
Yeah,
Yeah.
first stage.
is would be.
Maybe you can also tell me what time of the year we are.
Some.
I want like you're allowed to be off by
Yeah,
1 or
we
2
have
weeks.
we have
Days.
2 molted primaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's golden molting season, right?
Yes, so it must be summer. So
Summer?
like
Yeah.
June. It's actually the 23rd of June.
Yeah, that would maybe be, yeah. I think I think so. For example, birds in southern Europe they would start a bit earlier, and our birds start a bit later. And actually, most of our birds are at this state now, or maybe more than 3 or 4 feathers. If I would get a bird in Germany, I would probably set maybe 1 or 2 weeks earlier. But
Yeah.
like, it just depends here. Here, they
But
start
I'm
a bit
thinking
later.
later, of course.
Yes, and in that case, I think 2 to 4 primaries more than now is what we have in most birds now.
Okay, so June.
Yes, and you can also see that the new feathers they are jet dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like first time.
They are very dark.
Yes. So it's also very wonky, of course, because it's already a year old now.
Yeah. And we see that the molted feathers are very dark.
So it would be either lesser blackback or greater blackback.
Yes, because
That's
it
what
doesn't have greatness, yeah. That's right. Very first Asian bird too.
Yeah. Is that the 3rd cycle?
Or it's molting from the 2nd to the 3rd cycle, yes.
Yeah.
Because you can see that now it's
Doing
because
the
after
primary.
the first time they molt again into brown primaries, they don't get these white ones.
Yes.
And then in the second molt they molt by the dark feathers.
Yes.
And you can also already see that the thing's like really white. So
Yeah.
if you would have a second calendar year bird now would molt from the first cycle to the second one, they would still have like lots of dark markings here. They would still have juvenile feathers left. It's a bit difficult to see, but these greater ones don't really like just messed up completely. But
So it's a
Third
third
calendar
calendar
year
year also.
so this would be a third calendar year
Yeah.
molting into its third cycle. And probably these dark feathers here, as in the bean cuts, will probably cut them doing the molt now. So if you would have it like 2 months earlier, then it would
Yeah.
look a bit different. But yeah, already very white plumage. Also the bill base gets a bit lighter.
Mm.
Tail has also been molted. You don't really see that juvenile pattern anymore if you look at it. Yeah, it's a messy bird. But yeah. And now what species is it?
Could it be?
How does the bill look like?
Bill looks
Yeah.
quite heavy, but
It's a bit covered with the background.
Yes.
It's not super easy to see, but
Yeah.
Okay.
it looks. I think it
It
looks
looks
like
strong.
also like the head doesn't look round. It looks
Mm.
more like greater blackback shape. But
also the bird looks
no,
quite
it's
big.
surprisingly hard to judge.
Yeah.
And then now maybe if you remember how there's a blackback called molt.
Yeah, they should be more advanced.
Ah, they should be
Yes.
more.
Yeah,
They would have
Shading more.
already have the
smaller
mental
birds
model,
takes
yeah.
them less time to get like more notes because it's just like this.
Yeah, makes sense.
Then is it lesser blackback?
That would quite a bit.
Greater blackback. Wait.
Because
what's-
that's a blackback they have more advanced molds.
They would
look-
already have
they
the
would-
grey matter.
Yeah, they would already have
Oh.
gray matter. It depends on the subspecies too, but also quite early they would have looked more advanced.
Okay.
Also, they would have more like dark feathers also here, different colors and everything.
Okay. Yes.
And of course bill shape. Head size and just like look at this beast. That's of course not easy if you're gonna have in the field. Would be easier in the field.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Lesser.
Marinos.
Greater blackback.
Great.
I'm fucking confused. Greater blackback.
So lesser blackback because it's the small ones and they're a bit more extensive mold and they also have finer bill, not as strong. Yes.
So the lesser blackback does a more extensive mold
Yeah.
than the greater
Yeah.
blackback.
And it also takes
Molds
them,
quicker.
yeah,
Molds
because they're
quicker.
also smaller so it doesn't take them that much time. Often you see it in larger birds and they're slower.
Great.
The pictures from I'm not telling you.
I'm not telling you.
It's from Eric. From Gren, the beach.
Yeah.
So it's like a home advantage for you guys.
There is some anchor.
Can you see the special stag light?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
There is some anchor pattern on the mantle and on the scapular.
Mm-hmm.
Scapulars.
The rest of the wing is like.
I would say it's
So it's not first cycle.
second cycle.
But they often mold their mantle and zebras, right? So you mostly need to look on the wing.
Yes.
So like the mantle feathers, they're second generation. You're right.
Yeah.
But it's the rest of the wing is juvenile, maybe or not.
The greater colors have this like, light tip,
Yeah.
but are they still juvenile?
How do they look in general?
Very brown.
Yeah, and then
Oh,
okay,
that's-
maybe I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's disagree on juvenile. I quickly show you a third cycle bird afterwards.
Okay. Yeah.
So that is
Yeah, that's the first cycle bird.
first cycle.
So all of this wing is juvenile.
Yeah.
You have like very uniform brown greater coverts also. These are all light brown, it's all juvenile pattern. If they get adult then they have the same pattern as here, so they're like more white, it's grey, they have like darker tips and it's over more white in the wing and everything. The tail has been molted so you don't have like dark tail band with like just regular markings, but it's like more, it goes, it's like really small fine markings going further up, and also the tail band is not solidly dark, but it's also like with some small white markings in between, so it's a bit more, not as clean, so the tail is also juvenile type.
We have a very white head, or like light head.
Yeah.
And we do
there's a
have
dark
the mask.
eye.
The
Yeah.
mask around the eye.
I don't know if it's a scarf or is it a turtleneck or is it a scarf?
I don't know, just there's streaking on the rest of the head. Also the limit to this neck.
I would say it's
It's kind of limited, yeah. So then it would maybe not be
The bill.
a Caspian.
Yeah.
Why is it not a Caspian?
Because I would expect the scarf to go a little bit more upwards behind the head. Or not?
The bill doesn't look Caspian-like, to me at least. It looks too heavy.
It is quite heavy, yeah.
What I say?
If you are seeing it standing, then you will see Caspian color.
Simon.
Sorry.
Oh, and
Yeah,
I was like,
I think it was
not
small.
Caspian.
The tail one actually
Yes.
looks like it has slightly less white on the outer ones as well. Is that just the photo or is that just how they look?
On the tape it is?
Yeah,
Yes,
tail is-
that's how they can also look.
Okay.
But it's like, also what I said, so first of all, start with the greater coverts and they're uniformly brown in outer ones.
Yeah.
That cannot be a herringull then.
No.
No.
Can I sit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Then we have white heads,
Yeah.
also not good for a herringull, right?
No.
And there's still like the scarf, it's only streaking the neck.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a herringull, but
No.
why is it not a yellow leg?
Yellow leg.
So that's the interesting part.
First of all, streaking the neck is like very considered. There's not really much streaking around the eye.
Okay.
It always looks a bit darker as some streaking. Bill could be more slender, but also varies. For example, female would have a more slender bill, and then if it's a male, they can also have a stronger bill. So that's also a good bill for that. Then also the dark is quite far in, and there's a fine marking here. But it's like not like yellow like would have the same coarse barring as a herringull there, often going until here.
Okay.
Oh.
Then if you look at the tail, also these colors are quite uniformly brownish, and there would be a bit more evenly brown and white. Like and often they also would have more feathers here. And then if you look at the tail band, then there's a lot of markings going out here. And yellow usually has a very clean cut here without these markings, or very few markings. And also what's good for Caspian gull in this tail is that it's like very regular markings here. And that's very typical for Caspian gull. If you go so just look at the tail compared to a herringull, then it would have like larger irregular markings coming out.
Yeah.
And also upper tail coats are quite wide, also bad for herringull and good for yellow leg gull or Caspian gull. That is the Caspian gull, the pictures from Eric from Stag. Now I don't know if you remember something of the wing pattern.
Yes.
So we have
First thing you do is count how many primers are black.
it's 6,
Yes.
and the 6th one.
Has a complete dark band.
Yes.
So
So
it's
And
not.
also
not a
the
herringull.
P1 has like the full white tip, and then the P2 has like a nice wide band that goes on the both
Yeah, and
veins.
combined with like the not dark eye,
Mhm.
so it's not a Caspian. Also, this would mean it's a yellow leg.
Yes.
Correct.
No.
No, the other way around, right?
Mhm.
The other way. Oh no.
Yeah.
There's a bit variation. You even get
Okay.
Caspian Gulls with the light eye. This is also not a very light eye. But yeah. But then you see this on P10, I would call it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so much white on P10 all the way to tip. There's no dark band or anything.
Yeah.
So a lot of white here, long white tip. That's
I
like for
remember.
Caspian Gull. And then also the white goes over both, like over the complete feather, and it's quite a lot of white.
And also goes to 6.
And then you also get these great tongues going quite far into here. You see that?
Yeah.
It's like a bit easier if the wings bit
Yeah,
more
they-
spread. But in yellow color would be a bit more solid. Darker.
Yeah, the
And they would have usually only like a smaller white dot on P9 and also broken and less like probably be dark until here and then they would be like white here and then broken again. So.
Would yellow like have an overall darker, like more
Mhm.
extensive black
Yeah.
tip on the wing?
Yes,
It was also like the
Like
second
Or
primary.
darker
Yeah.
and then also it's always difficult to judge in the field, but then also a bit darker gray on the back.
Yeah.
A bit darker gray, but it's like
Yellow legs.
that takes a bit
darker.
experience.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
you look at a lot of them and then you see the yellow leg,
But
bluish gray.
to me, the eye doesn't look dark. It's just in the shadow. Of
It is darker than most herringulls, and also there's Caspian gulls with a light eye.
Okay.
That's possible.
Okay.
There's only no herringull with a dark eye,
Okay.
except
Yeah.
they're immature. So
Yeah. So the whole eye thing is not the most useful.
nothing is. as a
Nothing is
feature.
useful.
Yeah, only,
No.
only the combination is useful.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see.
So that would be.
Can we get more
Caspian
wings?
Gull
The Caspian gull
in
is.
the
Yeah. 5,000.
fifth cycle plus.
Yes.
Or what? Is there a little bit of dark in the bill? What?
Yeah, so maybe it's super little.
Yeah.
Probably it's a super little, but that's at least 50 plus.
Yes.
Could also be over.
Do you have more wing patterns coming up?
Not sure. Yes. Plus. You have more of these immature birds though. I can show you some later.
This has very light window.
It's
in
very
the front.
strict. Yeah, but is it useful at that time? In this plumage?
What age is the bird? There's also the window change with age. If you have like a
First cycle.
Yeah.
Hmm?
First
greater
cycle?
covers have a juvenile pattern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like there's not in all others. I will show you later with second generation greater covers where there's like really like fine grizzled pattern. Tails also would be more white than
Yeah.
like in mortal tail and. There's
Yes,
also here covers are all juvenile.
We
And
do have
these are
the anchor
mortal.
pattern, right?
These
Yes.
are mortal like in most birds. Like
Yeah, we have the
yes.
anchor.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
But
first
then-
cycle, the head is quite streaky.
Mhm. Belly also, but you think you can see.
Yeah. So, like with the white light panel, it would be a herringull then.
Yeah.
Yes, you have it like especially here. There's I think it started small. I think it was also me or something. But here you can see also especially like very white panel.
Okay, I don't remember about this white even at that
Yes.
age. I
So-
thought it was for a little bit older.
No, it's like actually only for juvenile wing
Okay.
really. And then herringull has this very white panel. Usually you will also see it in the field now if you look at the
Yeah.
younger ones. And then Caspian gull has less white, but still quite obvious white.
Mm.
And then the ones that have almost no white is less of that big gull and yellow leg gull.
Okay.
And also greater backpack gull doesn't have that much of a white window. So
Sure.
also if you have it in hand, you can also look at that a bit maybe. But also of course if you're very close then.
Yeah.
Also for example if you open the wing more because always the outer wing is dark and the
Yeah.
inner wing is light. I think
Yeah.
it's always a bit difficult to judge how
Yeah.
it would look now in the field.
Though here with the greater colored pattern and the head being streaky at that age and stuff, that could be enough to say herring.
Yes. So that's great because that's very typical.
Yeah.
Streaky tats.
Yes.
Also if you look upper and under covers they're quite well patterned.
Yeah.
So in all other species it's like lighter colored usually. And yeah then
Can we judge the
tail is folded.
Yeah.
But you see like dark markings, like strong dark markings. It's a bit difficult. You can see that's not a yellow gull because they don't have these dark markings. And also it's not so easy now from this picture, but that's more with the finer regular markings than that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also mold is only restricted to the back,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which doesn't exclude other species, but it was not supported other species.
So we have a
Yeah, that's a black
black-headed gull.
Yes.
The
But
legs
now we
yellow.
have to remember how they mold exactly because it's quite
Depends on the
advanced.
subspecies. Probably. Remember,
Yeah.
you tell me subspecies, then you need to age it, and then you need to.
I think
So-
intermediate.
Yeah, if you remember, Grailsy is like very
Yeah.
light grey, then
Yeah.
Intermediate is like intermediate, and then Fuscus is like jet black.
Yeah, so it's intermediate and
Yeah, intermediates.
third cycle or fourth cycle? Or fifth cycle?
No, not fifth.
What is useful in the after the first mold to age them? Well, it's like it's like almost maybe like there's not many bulletproof features in gulls, but there's one bulletproof feature, and that's only the primaries. Do they have white tips or don't they have white tips?
No, they don't. Could it be braided?
Yeah, they look quite nice, right?
Yeah.
And they also look very uniform brown, so it's not like there's like maybe like a small leftover of the white tip or anything.
And the white tips
So I would say they don't have a white tip.
Okay.
only come in the
Yes.
first. So would it be
So-
second cycle?
Yeah, they only get the white tips after the second primary mold.
Okay.
So in the third cycle.
Yeah.
So,
So that would be
the
second
question
cycle.
the question is now, is it the bird that was born last year in its first cycle? These feathers are juvenile and it is molded all these feathers in winter and now comes back as juvenile plumage, or is it the bird in its second cycle with everything molded? And I think, yeah, what would you say? You can also use a bit of bill maybe, for example. Looks quite apple black, right?
Yeah, it has a bit of dark streak, but not so much.
So I would say it's a second
Yeah.
cycle. Yes. And then if it would be a third cycle, then you would have white tips to the primaries.
So that's the that's a red light.
Yes, that's the red back.
Yeah.
But intermediate.
Intermediates, yes.
Yes. And then Fuscus, they are more advanced, so when they come back as a first cycle bird, sort of, not really because they've already had a complete mold, so if they come back in the second calendar year spring, then they already look like second cycle gravity intermediates. Or maybe start with the age.
Yeah.
So the front one must be first cycle
First cycle?
with like dark, not
Yeah, but there's
with a
some.
broad pattern graded colors, right?
Yeah.
I think the pictures from Skagnagle.
Okay.
But there is anchor.
But they can have the anchor in this first
So
cycle.
it's juvenile.
Yeah. It's like only on the mantle. Like these feathers are almost always molted in the flag shortly after the hatch in autumn.
Oh.
So it's only when you want to look for if it's like old or young, is the wing feathers.
Mhm.
Yes. And there you want to see anchor pattern or not.
Mhm. It's a bit hard to see here. I don't know.
And on the other one, the graded color pattern is more fine.
It's
But on the second one you can see the tail,
Yeah, what does the tail say to you there?
not of juvenile type.
Yeah. So there's lots of small white markings,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
small, like very sprinkled, and also there's white in the tail bands, like
So,
the white markings.
yeah.
So it's not a dark solid band and then like regular markings, but it's like very
And
sprinkled.
we
There's also
already have.
some grey
Yeah.
on the back.
Exactly.
Some
Yes.
plain grey.
And what Julian said, the Gredicaurs have this fine barring, they're not like this anymore.
Yes.
Also the rest has this like more white parts, like this anchor barring is a bit difficult because the picture's not in very high resolution, but it's like different to this. And tail and also the tertials have much more white in them. And are also like sprinkled white, irregular patterned.
Yeah, and can we use like the primaries? They look a bit more light on the edge, on the tip, or is it just less worn, better
Yeah.
quality maybe?
Yeah, I would say so. Because also you need to differentiate between proper white tips, like
Yeah, of
White
course it's
tip
not white tips.
or a white fringe, and I would
Yeah.
call this a white fringe.
Yeah, it's not a white
So it's
tip.
just because they're rather fresh in that case.
But then it would make the front one the first cycle and the second one the second cycle.
Yes, correct. And we could call this, that's like first winter, so it could be between November or October, let's say October and April, we could say. They just get more warm here, so could be any time of that. So, yeah, yes. And now the species.
Yeah. To me it looks like a herringbone probably.
Yeah.
What features do you see for herringbone in the first one and the second one?
So the streaking on the head, it's actually on both have the streaking. The first calendar, or like first cycle, is more the streaking. But still both of them happen. Then what we already talked about, the greater covered pattern. So like the regular rows of notches. But that one is of course only in the juvenile.
Yeah,
because-
only goes
But yeah. Also the head shape.
Different size.
Hmm?
Why does it look like they're different size?
That's happens, yes. And probably this one is female version.
Mhm.
Also from the full shape is.
Yeah, they're very variable in their size and usually males are lovers.
And I think also head shape is useful.
Yeah, and often what you see also head shape is often the smaller birds they get also more rounded head, also in herringbone, and if you get a really chunky bird, they often also have a bit of more square head, which maybe reminds a bit more of yellow gull. If you get a large herringbone, you can also get this blocky head shape, but it's only in the large ones then. So there's also but you see like this small gull has a very rounded head, and so it has a bit more than that blocky head.
So it's two herringbowls and
Two herring.
the
Also,
first is in first
yeah.
cycle and the other one is in the second one.
Yes. You can also see here turtles are rather uniform brown, which in the first instance like the feature for Caspian gull, for example, but it's also just variable because
Yeah.
it's that never only one feature.
You did say that.
And also there's like they're worn off now, but there was like proper white tips, not only like a pale tip with the dark shaft, but like proper white tips on the tertials. And also some markings here in the edge, but they're just worn off, that's why they look more uniformly brown.
Yeah.
But if you would get them with fresh plumage, then it would look a bit different there.
Yeah, the greater colors are clearly wrong. It's good.
Both herringbone.
Mm-hmm.
First sight, second sight. No, this one. There's a second picture of the same bird. Like this.
Is that a first cycle Caspian?
Caspian.
What speaks for you towards Caspian? What speaks against
So-
Caspian?
Like first maybe why it's first cycle. I think the wing is first generation, and then the back like the anchor pattern
Mm-hmm.
is already second generation. And then the Caspian, so we have the light head. I think this one is actually quite obvious. But we have the dark scar. What we don't have is the white belly, or like the white body, but I don't know how much variation we can get.
Could also be
Yeah, but
early in the
it's raw.
season.
Yeah, I think that one you can, if you look at the feathers though, they're very worn. So I would probably say this bird's from pictures from February or March.
Okay.
Because you can see the juvenile feathers are quite braided. Here there's like things missing here.
Yeah.
Like they're all very worn.
Okay.
Also, you can also look at the tertial pattern.
Yeah. And the greater covers,
They don't have
the outer
nice
greater
long-
covers are darker, and then the inner greater covers are more towards the herringbone pattern, sort of. And I thought that was good for Caspian.
Yeah, often Caspian gull is a bit finer pattern than the inner ones.
Yeah.
And this one is a bit irregular, but it looks rather coarse.
Okay.
And then also you see in the belly is like a bit more, it's a bit darker than usual for Caspian gull, and also the upper tail, and the
Yeah.
tail goes a bit more. Maybe look at
But
the
then
tail.
the tail. Yeah. Is this the banding? Is it too irregular for a Caspian?
The Caspian gull is the most regular banding.
Yeah.
So we really have these like very similar row, 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 and often herring gull has like dark smudges, like irregular, and also a bit fewer and larger ones, not like these nice lines here. And also there's a lot of white in the tail, which is also good for Caspian gull, and herring gull often has so many marks that it like completely covers the tail.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
But
first,
upper tail covers a darkish white. So what do you say is?
First cycle Caspian.
yeah.
Well, there's some things are off with that bird. Oh, what? No! The plot twist! Caspian.
It's
a hybrid.
Oh!
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
so cool.
I want to keep some confusion with you.
There we go.
Don't think you can identify every bird.
No, sure.
Yes, so what was off for Caspian on this bird now is that
Is the
Yeah, like
upper tail
upper and undertail are a bit dark markings, and then
They would
also-
be lighter if it was a pure Caspian.
the belly is a bit dark. Yes, I mean, there's some variation. Then what I would also say is a bit unusual is that the legs are rather short, or the colors are short legs.
There's something hard to see.
But that's not so easy to. And then I would also say I would expect in the Caspian gull maybe the greater covered to in the inner ones that there would be a bit finer pattern because this almost
Yeah.
approaches the
Yeah.
pattern of yeah. And also this bird is also hybrid because its parents were ringed and you don't need the image, and then you got the chicks and the chick is a hybrid.
Cute.
Because this,
But if you saw this bird, you would.
You would be
I think it would be a weird Caspian gull, so you would be
Yeah.
probably a bit careful with that. Call it a Caspian gull. Probably it has some
But it-
features.
Yeah.
It looks more like Caspian gull than a pure herring gull. But this is something. If you get trained, if you live in Eastern Germany, where like many hybrids occur, then it's quite possible to call this hybrid in the field.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's why we
That was
only
interesting.
identify the typical birds,
Yes.
like the ones that look like the ones I used before, like this. Oh, that's a Caspian gull.
Oh, fantastic.
He's nice.
Yeah, and you wanted to see the wing pattern again.
Yeah.
So Caspian gull has this white going in, a very large white wingtip
Yeah.
without a black
Yeah.
band. There's like a
Yeah.
small black dot, but it's variation. But there's usually like a very long white wingtip without a black band, and then a complete white band over here. It's also rather large. And if you compare it with yellow-like gull,
Yeah, it's quite different.
have like a black band here. There's also always variation bit, but in general, like this the rule, and then there's only a small white spot here on
Yeah.
behind that often is only on one side of the feather.
And in general, it's also very
More
dark.
dark, more dark. Also the grays, of course, are darker, but it also takes the experience, and it also depends on the light always. But if you have them in hand, then you can use the Kodak scale. Then you can take a gray scale and put it on the back of the bird, and then you can
That's
find the exact Kodak scale because then the light on the scale and on the bird is the same, so then you can
Yeah.
compare it. But if you take it from pictures, that's very difficult
Yeah.
to judge because, yeah. Then we have again a Baltic gull. We have only very small whites. So the ones we get here, they have more white in the wingtip now. They have like, usually two feathers, proper white wingtip if you look in the field. So this would be really good for a cat for a Baltic gull, but still it's not really possible to be 100% sure that it's not the intermedius of the very eastern origin. So if you get this, then you can probably call the Baltic gull, and you cannot report it in the wild because you need this, yeah. And then the herring gull has like less, like often it's really only on these 5 feathers, and often there's no black here. Sometimes there's like or quite often also there's like this small dark marking and then like a very weak band, but like not a complete band like in the ones you would see in the Caspian gull and the other gull.
Can you see the tail patterns again? Because I kind of get confused with that, I think.
Where do we have it? Here.
Okay.
So, herring gull, very large, a bit irregular markings. You see the really broad, dark bands here. There's some, here they don't form always nice bands, and there's also just like dark spots there on both sides. Like here, it's just like a bunch of spots. And then Caspian gull always has this rather narrow bands, and a lot of white here on the tail. Like there you can really see white, but here it really reaches the upper tail.
I think like the
Yes.
tail looked quite like this in the hybrid, right?
Yes, it was good. It was a nice Caspian gull tail, yes. And also upper tails are whiter here in these species than in herring gull. Like these very nice bars. So. And then, yeah, Caspian gull is a bit more similar to that. It has a lot of markings here. They also form like these sort of pattern, but also the white on the tail sides. And then in the yellow decal, really like some irregular, like small dots here everywhere, but usually very clean cut in the white and the black. Yes. And then again, there's one more thing, wasn't it? So this is juvenile wing here, brownish everywhere. You can see it contrasts to the morted mantle feathers and all the birds. Also, these have been morted with this anchor pattern. And then if you get, and there's just one, no, this plumage here. This is second cycle, so they've had a complete mold, and all greater covers and everything as the anchor pattern is finely barred. So if you see a largely uniformly brown wing, that's always juvenile, and then they also have this coarse barring, or it depends on the species how the barring is. But all of these birds, they have like this very fine, with like small white markings everywhere randomly in the greater coverts, for example, but also here, it's all different. And then the tertials, they have like largely white tips, but also very irregular in all species there. You see like also here, it's like, what's that? Okay, that's it. Any more questions? Yes. Oh, we need a break then we can go on later for the golf.
Yeah.
Very good. Jànos. I will